Hi, this is Wes Hewitt. This is going to be a two-parter showing you first how to create an activity diagram, and then the second part is going to be requirements and creating your requirement diagram. Um, so here is the basic H hybrid SUV use case that Dave showed in class. And a lot of people notice, oh yeah, we got some extends that includes these other use cases which are tied to a more of a kind of like a parent or a master use case, okay? And what does that mean, okay? So these relationships help define that here with the driver. And sometimes, and this is one reason why you have sub-use cases, is because whenever you have a function that can be used more than once, that's a perfect way to create another reason to create another use case. So it can be used by in other instances. Okay. So I'll show you here. We're going to be looking at a toy being played with a child, and this is the new use case, and we'll create this activity diagram related to playing with that toy. Okay, so here's a little more of the components of the activity diagram. Now at the top here we have just some preconditions for, and you notice these are states actually, whether it's unloaded or armed, but what are the preconditions for this particular activity? Normally you would find this information also in the use case. What is the precondition for the use case? And the post condition, which we have down here as notes. Okay, so Dave likes this configuration, and we're going to also show you how to create a partition or swim lanes with child, and here in the toy is your main system, and another external thing in your projectile. So, okay, it starts with the starting node, and then a terminal node. Okay, down here, one's dark and one has a line, has a little bit of white on the outside. Okay, so this is pretty straightforward. There's no real logic in there. So, okay, so let's take a look at this. Okay, so here we have Cameo, kind of white where we kind of left off in the previous model for the toy. And so you can see here the toy here has a little fork here, which means we've added some kind of link to it. And here it's an activity diagram. So when you click on this, you can come down here to say create an activity diagram based on this use case. Okay, so if you go find this choose toys use case over here in the browser, you know, this is where you can, so here's the right one here, and all these things have been put under included. This is what an activity looks like, and then this is what the activity diagram. It's all associated with this use case by creating it this way. Okay, so here on the use case that we were talking about, where you can extend here, like playing the toy, I'll give you a quick example here. So these sub-use cases here are important to play with the toy, and we want to show that relationship by using extend and include. So include basically means here to, when you select this, you select the main one and you say this use case here is included when you execute this one. So it's like in every execution you have to have this use case. And so let's say that's the same for setting up and dismantling the toy at the end. You want to include these separate activities, describe, and then within each use case down here, see under here documentation, when you select this, you can write down what the detailed description of the use case is and precondition and post conditions right here. Okay. And then there's also some properties that shows you the types and locations. So that's good information. So each one of these use cases you should document with this kind of information, okay? And there's a little, you can either do it in HTML or you can turn that off depending on what you want. and it's got some other HTML features here. Okay, so there's the include, okay, which means mandatory. So let's do an extend. Extend means, okay, this is a use case you may need. Okay, it's a hypothetical, but sometimes we call them off nominally use cases. And so the direction is in the opposite direction. And then it may ask you, do you want to use an extension point? Okay, so that's another, let's say it's an advanced feature, which you don't read right now. So I'll just say no, okay? And so this use case, so now these are all linked. I think if you click on here and go to properties, sometimes you can see it'll show you different information about it. And if you ever want to change colors of your items here, you can go in here and click on here and change colors to text color and things like that. So again, and that may relate to your legend, okay? Same as right clicking when you go into symbol properties. Okay, so that's an example of how you create those included and extends. Okay, so let's go to the activity diagram. So let's say you want to, and I have an example here. Here's an activity diagram which I created for the toy. And if you go to here to the zoom, you can come here and hit this little button here. Or this, let's see, if you click on the outside of this thing, this button kind of brings the frame. And I've been giving people feedback to make sure you don't leave the frame off when you submit your homework. The frame is a part of the diagram and this name here, okay? So make sure you don't leave that off. Now what this is good for too, down here, it's used for zooming. So if you want to zoom in, you can obviously bring that up. That's one way to zoom, okay? So this is the kind of the activity diagram I want to show you how to produce, okay? With start node, what the child starts off to do as an activity, and these are all control flows, this dotted dash line, versus later on they'll talk about object flows, where maybe water or electricity or something is actually going between two activities in a process. Okay, so this is pretty direct forward here with no really decision points, but it gives you an idea. So how do you create this? So let's take a look at going back here. Let's see. So, in the IBD, the internal block diagram, which shows your context. So here's your toy. So all these things could potentially be swim lanes when you're developing this. Okay. So let's go back to here, this one here. So we got two. We can do the toy here. And let's do this one. We'll click on this and we'll come down here where it says, it'll show up. It says SysML activity diagram. Click on that. And now the diagram pops up. So this is a sub diagram of the other one. So if you want to go, because of that relationship, it's got an arrow up here, and you can click on this arrow back to toy. You can kind of go back and forth between the two diagrams. Okay. So here in this diagram, I want to create some swim lanes. Okay. And one of the, so I want to basically do 3 swim lanes, okay? So down here you can see there's a couple ways of doing swim lanes or partitions. And there's a couple options here, vertical, horizontal, one with a vertical hierarchical. Okay, in other words, there's high and containing, and then there's the horizontal, and then there's this matrix one. So we click on here, we click on here. Say cancel on this because you don't want it to automatically necessarily generate, but you can if you want. You can automatically generate. So this has legend, and well, I obviously don't want the legend as a swim lane. Okay, so here it's got this little arrow here, so you can drag it maybe up in the corner. Okay, and I'm going to want this one, and I'm not going to allocate right now. I'm just going to keep it simple. So I'm just going to click in here and type child. Okay, and in here, let's see, where's my, bring up my slide here. Okay, so I'm going to kind of copy this a little bit. Let's see. So we have the child, and we're going to do the toy swim lane, and we're going to add another one here. So the easiest way to do that here is to right-click on this and say Insert Swim Lane. Okay, vertical on right. Okay. So if you right-click on these, you can see here, this is the easiest way to add swim lanes. You don't have to really drag and drop like some other tools. You can just say Insert. So here's an inner one. So if you click on this, it actually creates it a new one in between, two in between. So, and if you make a mistake, you just hit the back key. Okay, so right now this is fine. So this is going to be projectile. Okay, and if you need to make this a little bit bigger, you can do that. You can just drag that down. And let's say we also create the note for the top here for precondition and postcondition. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll come up here under common. Now there's two. You can use a note or a comment. Comment has persistence. In other words, it actually shows up in here, where a note is just a temporary thing. So you can click on here and say precondition and colon, the toy is unloaded and unarmed, which is kind of the state. Those are really the states that you're expecting it to be in for this, so you can just kind of drag that up there. And so for an example here, this is a comment. I would use one or the other, but I'll just show you what it looks like. So this is the post condition. The toy bolt is unloaded and unarmed. So it starts off and ends up the same way it was before. And unarmed. Okay. So the coloration is a little different. Again, you'd want to do one or the other, but it doesn't really matter. It says comment. This doesn't say anything, and it does show up over here in the menu in your browser. So either way, one or the other. Try to make them match up at the top. So it looks like it goes right across. Even bring it down a little bit. Okay, that's pretty good. Now, one of the things you notice, sometimes the boxes will turn red for some reason. Okay, and if you click on it and see this red X, okay, so element overlaps with the partition, but is not including it. So it's just telling you, oh, it looks like you put something on it, but you didn't actually allocate it. So you can either move it off the thing, or you can just say ignore. So let's just try moving this up a tad, and maybe moving this down a tad. I notice it stopped turning red. So if you see things turning colors like that, there's probably some kind of a warning, yellow or red. Okay, so let's do the activity here, where we have an initial node here. Okay, and I'm going to use the automatic control flow, and the symbol there is what's actually going to be used. If you right-click on that, you can change that if you want it to be something else. But right now, I'm going to leave it at the default for that. And I'm going to say child pushes receptacle into position. Okay, and so you notice when you move this thing around, you see the line that pops up. It's actually showing you the center. It does a lot of neat things. So I'm going to click on here again. I'm going to create now. So you got a line there, which actually shows you the middle. If you want it exactly even, which is fine. Some people like to put them lower than the other, but this shows a good flow. Okay, so I don't see any problem with it being the same, especially if you have a lot of these. So detect receptacle in proper position. Okay, and again, so you can keep on going here, creating these things. Let's see, does 2, then it comes back over here. So I'm going to bring this back down to the middle. So maybe this is another action. This is another action. Okay. And you notice down here, this one's turned red again. So again, it's saying, there's something weird going on. But if you just move it or hit ignore, then you can, okay. So, and at the very end, you just use your initial node. And again, you can either just put it here, go through the whole process, and then use the control flow or an object flow, or you can just use the default there by clicking on here. So, oops, yeah, we didn't want that. So hit the undo. Okay, so let's see here. Easiest way. Okay, now if I right click, let's see here. Did it create 2 or not? That's what I was afraid I was going to do. Okay, so if I hit delete, you notice it's going to still be here. So I want to get rid of it. So I'm just going to hit the back key. And that's the wrong one anyway. So I'm going to just delete that. Okay, so if you continued on with this, this would obviously look more something like this. Okay, I recommend use one of these or the other. Okay, and that's it for activity diagrams, and the next part will show you how to do include your requirements. Goodbye, back in a few minutes.